Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views on myself, Salai Lomakwidiri. We're going to head over to the Middle East now. I think this is a bigger story of the day. It's our top story of the day. We'll be turning our attention to southern Syria, a region once considered relatively quiet, especially amid the chaos of the country's decade-long war. But now the country and that region seems to be thrust into the spotlight this following days of deadly violence in the Suweda province, home to the majority of Syria's Druze minority. What began as an intercommunal clash between the Druze and the Bedouin tribes has spiraled into something far more dangerous, drawing in Syrian government troops, triggering Israeli airstrikes, and forcing multiple ceasefire deals, some brokered with U.S. involvement. And at the heart of this is a deeply sensitive and I think historically complex issue, the position of the Jewish community in Syria, a religious minority with roots going back to the 11th century. The Jews have often walked a tightrope caught between loyalty to the Syrian state itself and also preservation and resistance to extremist ideologies. But also, on the other hand, they've been heavily involved with the apartheid Israeli government. Almost, I think, 80% of the Jews community, or a large chunk of it, I'm not sure if I'm getting my stats right, serving in the IDF. So, yeah, we'll be unpacking all of that, especially looking at the current events with recent President Ahmed al-Shara, who took power after ousting Bashar al-Assad. The Jews have increasingly found themselves isolated and excluded some mention from meaningful political representation. And we'll be unpacking all of this and whether or not it's true. And I think in a twist that further complicates this narrative, as I mentioned, the apartheid state of Israel, which occupies the nearby Golan Heights and has also intervened militarily when it comes to Syria and the instability that is happening in the Soweto province. They're citing they have a responsibility to protect the Jewish community, some of whom also live under Israeli rule. So, what does this all mean? Is Syria heading toward another phase of civil fragmentation? Is the Jewish community once again being used as a political pawn to further push the agenda of the Israeli government? Joining us now, as I think as someone who's been tracking these developments on the ground, Bilal Abdul Kareem. He's a Syria-based American journalist and analyst with an extensive experience covering conflict dynamics within the region. Brother Bilal, thank you so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Salam Media.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. I think let's kickstart the conversation with the most immediate reality on the ground. What's the situation in the Suweda province right now, and maybe just the south of Syria? There's been a ceasefire that was put the last few days. Has it held water, and what are people experiencing as we speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Brother Bilal, are you there? All right, we're going to try and get hold of Bilal Abdul Kareem. As you heard me say earlier, he's currently in Syria, and as you can imagine, the network is not all that great. But we'll definitely be, trying to get the latest from him, trying to get a bit more background when it comes to the Jews community. I think what I know is most of the Jews live in the Golan Heights and identify themselves as Syrian. But I think in the last few years they've been rejected by several governments and regimes of Syria. And well, Israel has come in. They've offered most of them Israeli citizenship, especially after Israel seized the Golan Heights region. And those who refused were given Israeli residency cards, IDs, Israeli residency cards, but they've not considered or they're not considered fully Israeli citizens, unlike the Syrian Jews community. Brother Bilal, thank you so much for joining us. We just lost you for a moment there. Are you able to hear me right now at
Yes.
the moment? Yes, yes. I think, yeah, you can just go ahead and answer that question. If you can give us the latest on the ground in Syria right now, especially coming off the back of that proposed ceasefire. Has it held water? Is Suwaida and the southern part of Syria in calm at the moment? What was the latest?
Okay, so I think if you might allow me, just before we do that, I'd like to talk very briefly about the Druze community. You see, the Druze community is not one monolithic entity. It has many different factions. Most of the factions wanted to ally themselves with the new government. But there's one faction that didn't want to, and that's the faction of Hakmat Hijri. This individual is one of the spiritual leaders of the Druze community. I said one of the spiritual leaders, but he is backed by the Israelis. So it appears in the media that the Druze community support him and that they want to secede from the rest of Syria. But that's not the case. The case is that the Israelis want to have their own back guy and his militia force on their border. They don't want the government of Damascus on their border, as Benjamin Netanyahu said in March of this year. They would not tolerate any armed troops in Syria's southern border region. So they want this individual, Hakmat Hijri, to be the guy who runs the Suwaida province because he is backed and controlled and owned by Tel Aviv. So it's not a thing where the entire Druze community is, they're not.
Brother Bilal, I think if you could just move around a bit because we seem to be losing you, and I think you're making some very, very important points and giving us important insight. But as you do, I want to ask this question, and I think this is a question that's very, very important because this conflict it began very, very localized. It was a conflict between, as you mentioned, a certain sect of the Druze community and also some of the Bedouin tribes. How did it escalate so quickly to the point where the Syrian army and even Israeli airstrikes have become the order, have become involved?
Okay, the two communities have a history of not getting along from time to time. That's not new. However, a localized conflict became an international one when the Israelis got involved. Now, the Israelis got involved. Officially, they said it's because we have a Druze community here in Israel, and we basically owe it to them to protect the Druze community in Syria. That's not the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is that they got involved because they wanted to support their guy in Suwaida against the Bedouin tribe. And therefore, that's why they unleashed airstrikes on the convoys of the security services of headed by Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. So that's how it got internationalized. I'm not sure is that a word, because the Israelis got involved because they want an entire friendly border with them. I want to try to paint a very brief picture. To the east, you've got a place called Koneda. To the west, you've got Suwaida, and in between the two is a place called Kara. The Israelis control large territory in Koneda and large territory in Suwaida, along with the militia forces of the Hejri that I made mention of. The only place between the two that is not Israeli occupied on the entire Syrian southern border is Dara, and that's where I am. So I believe very strongly that they are going to make a play to occupy Daraa, and the entire southern part of Syria will no longer be under the control of, 70% of it is no longer under the control of the Nazis anyway. But I believe that they'll complete the other 30%.
Mm. I want to come back to the Israel element of it. The Israelis have cited the protection of the Jews as justification for its military strikes in Syria. How much of this is really about defending the Jews, and how much is just a geopolitical positioning from an Israeli point of view, especially given Israel's military interests in southern Syria?
It's totally bogus. It's fake. It's false. Is that clear enough? As I mentioned, what they want was a pretext to get involved militarily, so that because the Bedouin tribes, along with, firstly, the government forces that came in, and the forces of Hejri, the Druze militia forces, they were not able to take them on. So they called in the Israelis. Hejri and his group were going to fall, and that would mean that the Sueda region was going to be governed by Damascus. The Israelis didn't want that. So that's why they came in with their airstrike. Because if their guy would have fallen, that would have threatened their interest. They would have had entities on their border that were not necessarily working for their interest. I use the word not necessarily. What the matter is, they want to bear back to support the Hejri's forces control that region. And his threat that when the Israelis came in.
No, definitely. Brother Bilal, Abdul, Kareem, I think we're going to leave it here for now, but we'll definitely keep in touch with you as the situation in Syria, especially on the southern border with Israel, continues to unfold. And we really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. That was a Syrian-based journalist, Bilal Abdul Kareem. There, just giving us the latest when it comes to the Sueda province out in Syria, and the latest that is happening on the ground at the current moment. I think the latest that I also gathered is the fact that there have been reports that Syrian authorities yesterday evacuated Bedouin families from the Druze majority city of Sueda. This was after a ceasefire in the southern province, as mentioned, halted a week of sectarian bloodshed that a monitor said killed more than 1,100 people. The violence, which followed the massacres of Alawites in March and clashes involving the Druze in April and May, has shaken the Islamist rule of interim President Ahmed al-Shara, who has pledged to protect minorities in a country that was devastated by 14 years of war. The Syrian Observatory of Human Rights monitor said the ceasefire was largely holding despite isolated gunfire in areas north of Sueda city, but there have not been reports of casualties. And there's also been reports that say there's been a convoy of buses and other vehicles that have been seen enter the province capital and exit carrying civilians, including women and children. There's been media reports also that said 1,500 people from the Bedouin tribes were to be evacuated. The ceasefire, which was announced on Saturday, put an end to the sectarian violence that has left more than 1,100 people dead, most of them Druze fighters and civilians. And this was according to the observatory, whose toll also includes several hundred government security personnel. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this new government, this new leadership of Syria is going to be responding to I think this instability. I think after 14 years, we've all hoped and wished and prayed that Syria can finally have some sense of stability. But yeah, I think it's really concerning seeing how President al-Shara will be responding to this. This is supposed to be a phase of rebuilding. This is supposed to be a phase of nation building. After I think so many years of instability in Syria, but it looks like it's not getting any better. and I think one of the instigators of this obviously is the Israeli government. They have a very, very keen interest when it comes to the southern border of Syria. We know about the Golan Heights, we know about the Suweda province, and the Jews themselves, majority of them are serving in the IDF. And I think Syria wants to have, I think, a government which is united with all the provinces, I think, falling under one banner, becoming a democratic kind of state. But that would not, I think it would not be the best option for Israel, because for them, in my own assessment, I think a fragmented and stable Syria would be a better option, because it would mean there's less and less chances of them influencing the southern border of Syria, and it will be a fragmented state which Israelis thrive upon. So it'll be very interesting to see how the situation continues to unfold and how Syria's new leadership responds to it. And we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on all of the breaking news and updates coming out of Syria. Very, very important. The Middle East again thrust into turmoil and instability, and Israel at the center of it all. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.